The helicopter cut through the humid air. Below, the Amazon stretched out like a green ocean. Mark, his face weathered, gripped the seat. Beside him, Sarah adjusted her glasses, her eyes glued to the passing jungle. "Dense," she muttered, more to herself. Luis, their local guide, nodded. The heart of the Amazon. Many have entered, but few have returned. A shiver ran down David's spine. He lifted his camera, his face pale. "Don't worry," Emma said, her hand resting on his arm. "We're prepared for anything." Tomas, silent and imposing, checked his rifle. His eyes, though, held a flicker of unease. Mark clapped him on the shoulder. "Ready for an adventure, Tomas?" Tomas just grunted. He had a feeling this was more than a simple expedition. This was a one-way ticket into the belly of the beast. The sun beat down as the helicopter began its descent. A wave of heat washed over them as they landed in a small clearing. The jungle pressed in, a wall of green and shadow. This wasn't just an expedition, it was a suicide mission. The jungle floor was a labyrinth of roots and vines. Insects buzzed, a constant irritating hum. Sweat plastered their clothes to their bodies. Every step was a battle against the suffocating humidity. "Stay close," Mark whispered, his hand on his machete. They moved like ghosts through the undergrowth. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something ancient and primal. It was unsettling. David filmed, his camera lens misting up in the oppressive heat. Emma checked her supplies, her face grim. They were walking into a green hell. As night fell, they set up camp. A fire crackled, a small island of light in the sea of darkness. The jungle noises intensified, a symphony of growls, hisses, and screeches. Fear, thick and suffocating, settled over them. They were not alone. Mark woke with a start. The fire had died down to embers. The jungle was eerily silent. He reached for his flashlight, his heart pounding. "Luis!" he called out, his voice hoarse. Silence. Mark grabbed his machete and shook Thomas awake. "He's gone," Mark said, his voice tight with fear. They searched for hours, their calls swallowed by the jungle. Dawn broke, painting the leaves with a sickly yellow light. They found nothing. Luis had vanished, swallowed whole by the green abyss. Back at the camp, David was reviewing the footage from the previous night. Suddenly he froze, his blood turning to ice. He rewound the tape and played it again. A hulking, shadowy figure, all teeth and claws, flashed across the screen. This was no ordinary predator. This was something monstrous. The creature attacked at midday. It burst from the undergrowth, a whirlwind of muscle and fury, its eyes burning with primal rage. "Tomas!" Mark roared, shoving David out of the way. The creature slammed into Tomas, sending him flying. Emma screamed, scrambling for her medical kit. Mark emptied his rifle into the beast, but the bullets seemed to have no effect. With a roar, Thomas tackled the creature, wrestling it away from the others. They grappled, a tangle of limbs and teeth. Then with a sickening crunch, the creature was upon Tomas, its jaws clamped around his throat. With a final defiant roar, Tomas went limp. The creature lumbered back into the jungle, leaving behind a scene of carnage and despair. They buried Tomas under the watchful eyes of the jungle. The silence was heavy, broken only by their sobs. They were broken, defeated. "We need to leave," David whispered, his face ashen. "We can't," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "We need to understand what happened, what killed Luis and Thomas." That night, as they huddled around the fire, they heard it, a low chanting carried on the wind. It seemed to be coming from deep within the jungle. "What is that?" Emma whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Mark shook his head. He didn't know. But he knew one thing. They were being watched. The jungle was alive, and it was whispering their names. They followed the chanting for hours. It led them deeper and deeper into the jungle, until they stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a village of huts, crafted from mud and thatch. As they approached, figures emerged from the shadows. They were tall and lean, with skin the color of mahogany, and eyes that burned with an ancient fire. They were armed with spears and blowguns, their faces painted with intricate designs. The leader, a woman with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries, stepped forward. "I am Maya," she said, her voice raspy but strong. "We are the Tupanaka, the guardians of this forest." "We saw your friend," Maya continued, her gaze fixed on Mark. "He is lost to us now. The jungle claims all who enter its heart with greed and violence." They spent the next few days with the Tupanaka. Maya told them of the creatures, beings of pure darkness that haunted the jungle. They were the guardians of an ancient power, a power that lay dormant beneath the earth. The creatures are drawn to death and destruction, Maya explained. They feed on fear and anger. They are the curse of this land. The Tupanaka were preparing for war. They sharpened their spears and poisoned their darts, their faces grim. They knew the creatures would come for them, and they knew that this time, they might not survive. Mark and his team joined the Tupanaka in their preparations. They set traps and built barricades, their hearts heavy with dread. They knew the odds were stacked against them. They were facing an enemy they didn't understand, an enemy that seemed unstoppable. The attack came as the moon reached its zenith. The creatures swarmed the village, their roars echoing through the night. The Tupanaka fought back with the fury of cornered animals, their spears flashing in the moonlight. Mark and his team joined the fray, their guns blazing, but the creatures were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. In the chaos, Maya thrust a stone into Mark's hand. It was cold and smooth, pulsing with a faint inner light. "The heart of the jungle!" she shouted over the din. "Use it!" Mark raised the stone high above his head. A blinding light erupted from it, bathing the jungle in an ethereal glow. The creatures shrieked and recoiled, their bodies dissolving into shadows. As quickly as it began, the light faded. The clearing fell silent, save for the moans of the wounded and the crackle of dying fires. The creatures were gone, vanquished by the power of the stone. They left the next morning, their steps heavy, their hearts even heavier. The jungle had taken its toll. They were returning not as conquerors, but as survivors, forever marked by the horrors they had witnessed. As the helicopter lifted off, Mark glanced back at the shrinking village. Maya stood at the edge of the clearing, her face unreadable. Back in civilization, David was reviewing the footage. The events of the past few days played out before his eyes, each frame a reminder of the horrors they had endured. As he reached the final moments of the battle, he noticed something strange. In the background, partially obscured by the shadows, stood a familiar figure. It was Luis. But his eyes were different. They glowed with an eerie yellow light, the light of a predator. The jungle hadn't just taken Luis, it had transformed him into something monstrous, something inhuman. The jungle always takes back what it claims.